Hi guys, welcome back to Bowls Fan TV, and today we're back with another video doing the 2025 season review. Another season's come to an end, and the weird thing is we still don't know our fate in terms of Europe, which was probably something that we earmarked at the start of the season as something that we want to achieve, something that's very important. And look, we still don't know if we're going to be in Europe next season, but that all comes down to the cup final between Shamrock Rovers and Cork City on Sunday. But for now, we just have to talk about how the league campaign went, without knowing if we've achieved our main goal or not. But yeah, look, I think it's safe to say it was a season full of ups and downs. It was a bad start. We picked it up in the middle. And it was very, very up and down towards the end. But look, we still managed the top four finish, which is something that we were really hoping for at the start of the season. We really, really, obviously it was very important that we improved on 2024. Look, that wasn't going to be hard. Obviously, that was a very bad year that we just wanted to put behind us, and focus on this year. And we were relatively optimistic going into it as well. Like we always are at the start of every season. You get some signings in, and you look at the squad and say, yeah, we can have a real goal this season. And I think that's exactly what we felt going into 2025. We brought in a few players that we were excited about, and we knew that we had the players that were there from 2024, like Dawson and Rossi and El Rooney, Casper, players that were really good for us that season. So we were optimistic, we were hopeful, and that got off to a good start for the season when we played our rival Shamrock Rovers in the Aviva Stadium, in a game that we won 1-0. Ross Tierney with the goal, and that got the season off to a flyer. That raised the confidence levels even more. And yeah, it was the absolute perfect start, but sadly things didn't go so well after that. Just looking at the fixtures here, or the results even, we lost around the Spain after that. We went up to Derry and lost 1-0, then went to Cork and lost 2-1, then a 1-0 defeat to Drogheda. That saw us lose 3 on the Spain. And quickly the optimism that we built from that Shamrock Rovers win was kind of eroded after that. Had a slight reprieve then. We went up to Waterford and won 3-0, but then back-to-back losses against St. Pat's and Galway piled the pressure on Reynolds. I remember after that Galway game, a lot of people were saying it's time for Reynolds to go, and there was a lot of flack towards him and the other members of the backroom staff. At that stage, it was kind of looking like if there was no way back for him, especially with how 2024 went when he came in. There was no real improvement. It kind of just felt like it was time for him to go. It was the end of the road, but look, he picked it up. After that, a 4-2 win against Sligo, 1-0 defeat against Shells and Tolga, but then after that, a 1-0 win against Cork and Dalymount. I remember that game being like a bit of a slog. We didn't play that well. We got a late goal, and there were still people saying, he has to go even after that. But what really changed things then was our trip to Tallaght on the 21st of April. We weren't feeling very hopeful, just because our record in Tallaght was so poor in the seasons previous. And we despite the fact we came off a win, it wasn't a good performance, and we were kind of almost accepting our fate even before the game started. And I actually remember we started that game quite well, but still went in at 2-0 down, and there were we-want Reynolds out chance, despite the fact that we were actually playing well, and conceded 2 quick goals. But then the second half is what probably changed our season, really. Goals from Ross Tierney, Dawson Lavoy, and then obviously the late winner from Reece Brennan won us the game. And the mood after that just completely swung, and that inspired a really good run of form. Then I think the week after, or the same week even, I think that the Rovers game was on the bank holiday Monday. Then we played Pats and Dalymount on the Friday and got another late winner from Sean Gritton. And the confidence level was just shot through the roof from both the players and the fans' perspective. We did lose the week after that, actually, home to Waterford, but then a series space of 3 games where we won all three. A late winner in Galway from Sean Gritton, a late winner from Mills and Sligo, and then a 1-0 win against Sheld, saw us win 3 on the spin. And yeah, we were just on cloud 9, really. We were thinking, we've gone from being towards the wrong end of the table to, I think we were second, I think, after those 3 wins. So it was a real turnaround, and yeah, we were just full of confidence, and we did manage to continue that, with a couple of little bumps along the way, an away defeat and Drogheda, and an away defeat in Waterford. But then we bet Derry, we bet Cork in Cork, and then we had a Dublin derby against Shamrock Rovers in Dalymount Park, where for me we put in our performance of the season and won 2-0. And yeah, we were excellent that evening, and fully deserved to win the game. We noticed a real change then in the way the players were playing. They were just going out there full of confidence, fighting. It felt like, we had the chance to win every game. The atmosphere in Dalymount was really, really good week in, week out. And yeah, we all of a sudden we fired ourselves well into a race for Europe. We were second for most of that period through the summer. We kind of felt like Europe was nailed on by that point. But in typical Bowes fashion, when push came to shove, things did get a bit difficult. It did start a patchy run of form. That kind of started with the, just looking at it here, the 1-0 defeat to Drogheda in early August. That felt like a really important game in the race for Europe, and we lost it. Very, very frustrating that night. Drogheda were, defended really well, and got a goal late on the counter. And we kind of felt like, well, it's just one defeat. Okay, maybe it's a bit of a bump in the road. But after that Drogheda game, the inconsistency really started to kick in. We look at it here, a draw away in Sheld. We bet Cork, we drew with Sligo, but I think that the game after that was the real damaging defeat, and that was Derry at home, the 4-3. That was a particularly jarring one. It was another big must-win game that we just didn't turn up in. It was very end-to-end. We conceded some really soft goals that night. And yeah, just came out with the wrong side of another really big must-win game, and that kind of became a theme then after that. We bet Waterford the week after, but then lost in Tallaght against Rovers. Went to Galway and lost. That was a very disappointing night. We were really, really poor. The draw against Pats then after that, a little bit frustrating. We didn't do too bad, but we probably should have created a bit more, took a few more chances. I've been looking at how many times we said that over the course of the season as well. There were a lot of games that we definitely should have, there were draws that we should have turned into wins if we just took our chances. But then obviously the big collapse of the season was definitely the last home game of the season, against Shelburne. I'm sure most of us are probably still thinking about it. It was that bad. Yeah, we were 2-0 up and playing well, and then completely fell apart, conceding 2 goals late on, and after that everyone just felt like, yeah, this is it now. This is 2023, 2021 all over again. We'll finish 5th or 6th, and yeah, be kissing goodbye to Europe. But thankfully, that wasn't the case. We went up to Drogheda on the last day, and got a good 4-1 win. The players put in a really, really good shift. Probably our best performance of the kind of latter part of the season. And yeah, they deserve full credit for it, and we fully deserved the win. Dug in a really tough game, and that saw us finish 4th in the end. And yeah, look, it was definitely a campaign full of highs and lows. It was a bad start. We touched on it. Some of the defeats were really, really poor. It felt like it's just going to be continuation of 2024 all over again, where we just lose games in soft fashion, and in that period we were conceding some really soft goals, just like we did in 24. We couldn't score either. There were a few games where we actually didn't play too badly. That Galway game, the 2-0. I actually remember we were pretty good that night, despite the fact that we lost. And I think it just came down to the fact that we didn't have a consistent goal scorer. Obviously, Dougie came in the summer and got us a few goals to win us some games, and he helped a little bit. But ultimately, the middle part of the season was definitely our best run. Where we were getting the late winners. The confidence was growing amongst the camp. With the players and the fans, and that was when we knew we could give Europe a good bash this year. After that win in Tallinn, I think we won 7 from 9. We went on a really great run. Fired ourselves right into that race for Europe. We looked like the favourites for second. Up until maybe mid-July, early August, when we did start to crumble slightly. And look, that's obviously going to be the big frustration. That's the big negative probably of the whole season, is the fact that the bad start, and the fact that we did kind of stumble over the line towards the end. But look at the teams around us; they started to hit form. There's no doubt that Shels and Derry have probably they've got bigger squads than us. They can utilise a bit more in terms of bringing players off the bench. And making the difference in games. But I think that's probably the thing that affected us a little bit, is the fact that we probably didn't have the squad depth with the same as Derry and Shels do. But there also was that element as well where it ultimately kind of boils down to ourselves too, that we did kind of stumble over the line at the end. Just the fact that we did lose some silly games, we didn't turn up in the big games. And that was the big frustration. But thankfully, hopefully we do get over the line. Hopefully Sunday works out well for us in the cup final. And we do get what we set out to achieve at the start of the season, which was Europe. Moving on to some sort of individual awards that we can give out. In terms of a player of the season, I think it's hard to beyond Dawson. I think he's been sensational all year. We knew coming in halfway through last season, he made a good impact then, but we kind of knew that he wasn't with the full fitness maybe. And we knew that we were going to see even more from him this season, and look, we saw more and then some. He was just so central to everything that we did, that that was good about us throughout the season. Grabbing games with the scruff of the neck, just coming up with some big moments. He started to come back out in Tallinn by getting that goal. And there was just so many games where he just controlled everything and was just absolutely sensational. And I think rightfully he's been our best player this season. A couple of other players as well that were good. Jordan Flores, I thought was really, really solid at left back all season. Didn't let up in many games like maybe he had done in past seasons, where he let himself down at times. But I thought he was really solid all season. I think Casper was brilliant in goal again. Saved us in a few games. James Clark, we've had games of real quality that we can pop up with. They were definitely the standouts, but I think Dawson was the best of them all, absolutely. Young player of the season, I think Brennan is probably the young player that stood out the most this season. Probably popped up with our most important moment all season with the last minute winner in Tallinn. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fans' moment of the season, and rightly so. It changed the whole mood around the place. Apart from that, look, he didn't do much, but he's still a very young player, of course. Still plenty of time for him to develop into an even better player than he is now. He came off the bench in a lot of games this season and made a difference. He was lively and energetic. So look, there'll be plenty more to come from him in 2026, no doubt about it. Goal of the season. If we're talking about the goal in terms of its quality, you have to look at Dawson Devoy's goal against Sligo. Chipping the keeper from that far out. Obviously out of his goal, but still, an unbelievable finish. I thought Douglas James Taylor's goal against Cork was brilliant. The way he just fired it into the top corner, an outstanding finish. But if you're talking about a goal that in terms of its importance for us in the season, we talked about it before. It's probably Rhys Bredden's goal in Tallinn. Just the way that he was able to compose himself after having his first shot saved, then to get it back onto his left foot and finish. Just an unbelievable moment. If we're talking about the importance of the goal, then I think that's the obvious one. Our best signing. Look, I think we've spoken about the recruitment before. I don't think it was great, to be honest. If we're looking at the players that came in this time last year in the off season, not many of them worked out. Mills obviously was gone by the summer. He was our big signing that we all were probably the most excited about, and he was gone. By July. Colin Whelan, even though he ended up our top goal scorer this season with 9 goals, probably didn't make the impact that we would have wanted. Found himself, coming off the bench for the majority of the season. Look, obviously, gets a hat trick against Waterford and scores 4 in one game. I think it was against Colester. And then getting that goal in Drogheda as well on the last day. He has come up with some good moments, but probably not the impact that we were hoping he would make. Parsons is probably the same. Hot and cold. There were some games where he done quite well. There were some games where he was fairly anonymous, but overall, it's probably been a slightly disappointing signing. Alex Lacey, look, that was just an unfortunate thing. The fact that he suffered that injury, had to get 2 operations, only played half an hour. Look, that was just an unfortunate one. I think the two that stand out though were probably Niall Martin and Sean Gretton. Look, Gretton was only here until June, but the impact he made was super. Getting the last minute winner against Pats and Galway, 2 really massive wins that we needed at the time. And yeah, he was brilliant. Really solid, popping up with the 2, I think it's 3 goals he got. He was brilliant for that little period, and he was sorely missed when he left as well. Moran, I thought was good up until maybe the last couple of months. He started to wobble slightly, but overall I thought he had a pretty solid year. Playing out position for most of it as well. Playing right back and then centre half a few times as well. So yeah, I thought he done well. There wasn't much to pick from really. Like I said, I thought the recruitment was fairly disappointing again, but I think they were the two that stood out. Moment of the season, I think it's the winner out in Tala. I think that's everyone's obvious choice. Look, we spoke about it a lot during the video, how important it was at the time, how much we needed it, how much we needed a lift as a fan base, and what more of a lift could you get than getting a winner out in Tallaght in the last minute. But there were plenty of others as well, I think, that maybe slightly go unnoticed. The run that we went throughout the whole summer, I thought was brilliant. We had some great days out, some good away days. The Galway game I thought was brilliant. That was probably one of my favourite, if not my favourite away day, even over Rovers. I thought it was great. Everyone was in a good mood. It was great weather. The train back home was great as well. It was just non-stop singing for 2.5 hours more. So yeah, I thought that was a really great day. Yeah, same with Sligo. That was all in the same week, wasn't it? We went up to Sligo then on the Saturday, got another late winner, and yeah, again, great scenes. Really good time. On the bus up and back. Everyone's in a great mood, and that's why we do the away games. We just want to have a good time. We want to see us win, of course, but it's all about having a great time as well. And we had a few good days out this season as well, which was good. Because we didn't really have any of that in 2024. So just to have those few days out that we'll remember for a long time was great. Best performance of the season, I think we touched on it earlier. It was a 2-0 against Rovers for me. I think there was a few. There were a few games where you could definitely say we definitely turned up there and put in some good performances. Drogheda on the last day, I think, is up there as well. But particularly in the first half against Rovers and the 2-0, the energy we showed, the fight, just straight from the off, we were well up for it. Wanted it far more than them. Got the 2 goals. And yeah, that was an outstanding performance. Suppose you don't want to touch too much on negatives, but I think when it comes to kind of worst moment, worst result, you're probably looking at that run at the end of the season. Looking at it here, how inconsistent we were. The 4-3 loss against Derry and the 3-2 loss against Shels were particularly jarring. Yeah, they were the two that stand out for kind of low point, I think. Just because they were such big games, and the anxiety that they kind of caused after as well, didn't help. That last period of the season, God, we were all tearing our hair out coming on here, making, myself making videos saying, this is a must win. This is a must win. It just felt like I was saying the same thing every week. And yeah, that really was a stressful time. But thankfully, we've got into the top 4, and hopefully Europe's pending. So look, we got there in the end. And yeah, I suppose to wrap up 2025, look, it was an up and down year. I think that's definitely the right way to say it. We came into it optimistic. We got off to a great start with the win in the derby. After that, though, we suffered some defeats. We were calling for Reynolds' head, but then, the win in Tala changed things. We went on a great run. We kept it up. We fired ourselves into the top three, and said, look, Europe's on the way. It's on the horizon. But then, in typical Bowles fashion, it got nervy towards the end. But thankfully, we delivered on the final day, got ourselves into the top four. And ultimately, if Rovers win the cup on Sunday, we've achieved what we set out to do, which was get into Europe. And back in Europe, hopefully for the first time since 2021, which is which was the goal. It was absolutely the main goal. And even if we stumbled over the line, we had to really, really grind our way into it. Look, we still managed to do it. And ultimately that's all that mattered at the end of the day. But look, there's no denying we had some good days out. We had some great results. There was some bad as well. That's just the way it's going to be always with balls. We've been around long enough to know, but we wouldn't have it any other way, would we? It's just what we live for. We just want to go out there and see the team fighting for us. And look, I thought us as fans, and we definitely played our part this season. I thought the atmosphere in Dalymount was exceptional this year. Much improved on seasons gone by. And look, I think that some of that has to do with the fact that we were better on the pitch than what we were in recent years, and hopefully we can continue that then heading into our last year in Dalymount in its current form next season. But 2025, it's been a bumpy ride, but look, we've hopefully got there in the end, depending on Sunday into Europe and back where we belong. So yeah, that's where I'll end it. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, comment down below what you thought about the season, your favourite parts, player of the season, all that kind of stuff, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.